I am Genelle Winter. I work for the Metlakatla Indian community. I've lived and worked here on the Ned Island Reserve since 1992 and have been in part of the invasive species program since 2008 or so. If I can figure out how to advance it. There it is. So who we are, where we are. We are the southernmost community in the state of Alaska. We're right at the very bottom of the panhandle. And our community is Ned Islands Reserve. We're 15 miles from Ketchikan. We are on an island. We're only accessible by boat, float plane, or ferry. A little bit more, the Ned Islands Reserve is the only true reserve in the state of Alaska. This gives us authority as a governing body to control weeds, invasive species on reserve lands. MIC can approve, administer plans, we can apply for grant funding, and we can manage a robust invasive species program supported by tribal resolutions and local ordinances. Metlakatla is responsible and has stewardship over 87,000 acres of land and over 44,000 acres of water. And it's that management of the water that impacted our update to this plan. I kind of mentioned it already, but we've been having an invasive species program here since 2005. I know I've presented to this group previously about some of our invasive species work. We started off small, little tiny grant for like $1,500, and now with using BIA funds and other sources, we usually average about 60,000 annually. We started with just those 3 thistle species and 2 species of knotweed. And in the meantime, through our outreach efforts, we've been able to see that we are managing for 10 terrestrial species and 1 aquatic species. And then we also keep our eyeballs always kind of looking for additional watch species. And so right now there's 6 on our list, but we can always add to that. We work really closely with the Alaska Invasive Species Partnership, and they are this really diverse group of stakeholders, and they really inform a lot of our EDR, or early detection, rapid response efforts, and make sure that we're aware of emerging threats. So why do you need an EA? I know that I think it was Jason really touched on that we'd absolutely need environmental assessment partnered with our management plans. The number one reason is so that you're eligible for federal funding. If you don't have an approved EA, you may not be able to accept federal funds for projects that you are attempting to accomplish. An EA that's tied to your management plan informs your annual work plans, makes sure that you're in compliance with federal standards, and it can provide a framework for your outreach and education efforts. So our invasive species management program currently is managing over 12,400 acres of road right-of-ways, trails, other environmental cleanup sites that we are managing actively for invasive species terrestrially. To be really effective, we need that robust management plan, which means we have to make sure that we are paying close attention to any negative and positive impacts that are related to invasive species management. Our EA has to be really diverse. I know I was listening to Jason earlier saying that they got too big on themselves, trying to figure out how to address all invasive species concerns. So we really needed to make sure that ours was going to be robust enough so that we could use it for federal funding, state funding, local funding that would allow us to do management on our biggest problems in invasive species management, primarily our terrestrial species and then European green crab. So our first plan we wrote back in 2016, Robert Compton had come on as our invasive species guy, and we were applying for funding, and he's like, you know what, we actually need an EA to support the work that you guys are doing. So we plowed in, we dove in deep, and we wrote our EA ourselves. Thankfully, Robert and all the team there in BIA were an incredible resource. They helped us be effective. They made sure that we met all of the criteria and that we wrote a plan that could be approved by a finding of no significant impact or a FONSI. We were trying to make sure that we included some stuff that maybe wasn't a thing yet. So in 2016, we had this little paragraph, maybe 2 sentences, where we talked about European green crab, and we talked about Atlantic salmon, and we talked about a couple other potential invasive species. That turned out to be incredibly important, because when we did find green crab, we were able to use our current plan to be eligible for funding to conduct that early detection work, because we had mentioned it in our original plan. So one thing I would mention, if anyone is updating a plan, to do a little forecasting and make sure that you're thinking about things that maybe aren't a problem yet, but as long as you mention it in your plan, then you have some basis to apply for funding to address it in the future. Plans have expiration dates. The one we had in 2016 that we finished in 2016 expired in 2022. So knowing that that deadline was coming up, we started working with Robert at BIA. We got funding to do a new one. We got started on that work in 2023, and the consultant that we worked with was super great, and we were done by the fall of 2024, and we have a brand new plan approved by BIA as of December 2024. So a little more about our program. I know if any of you have heard us talk about it before, our program is really, really focused on the youth. We want to make sure that the youth are as the future stewards of the lands and waters of Annette Islands Reserve, that they remain engaged. We have them work on manual removal. We've put in boot brush stations on the trails. We've talked to the kids about what that is, and really try to link all of our invasive species management around those subsistence resources and the impacts to them. We really struggle in Metlakatla with manual removal versus chemical removal. As a general rule, the community is opposed to herbicides. They just don't want to see any negative impacts to our subsistence resources, especially on road right-of-ways where people are typically able to access very populations, and they don't want to have to worry whether or not there has been some sort of herbicide application in that area. So even though our primary removal is manual, we still need to make sure we are addressing those impacts in our EA. So it was an effort for us to communicate that really well with our consultant, to make sure that they were looking at the impacts of not just chemical use, but also manual use, and also what would happen if you didn't do anything. Manual removal is more labor intensive, but as long as you're consistent, we've really found it to be effective. We also find it's a really great opportunity to engage the youth by getting them out there and working with them to remove invasive species. The process of developing the EA meant that we had to make presentations to council, engage our natural resources committee and our planning committee in the process, and explain to them and help them understand that in some cases, in limited instances, herbicide use is much more effective, and actually it protects those resources that everyone is worried about. So we were able to incorporate some allowances that will allow us to use herbicide under this management plan in this EA, and making sure that, we're following local feelings, local cultural values, but also the label as the law and the actions that are outlined in our EA. I mentioned it earlier, and it's been mentioned along that, marine invasives is a big deal. We needed to really flesh out in our updated EA what our actions were going to be for green crab. We're way past rapid response at this point. We're looking at a long-term management and what that's going to look like, and what we're going to determine is a success. And so we were so fortunate that we had included those 2 sentences about green crab in our first plan, and that allowed us to start developing this program. And it has also allowed us to use our old EA as well as our new EA to validate and justify that Metlakatla is taking this seriously and that we have a plan. We're not just winging it. And we're really appreciative of all of the support from Lummi and Makah and Tulalip, other tribes that are facing the same issues in Washington, and the support that they've provided us as far as information and resources. So the actual process, right? So we learned from our first time that trying to do it on our own, while was possible, it was really, really difficult because we had so many other demands on our time, and it took way longer than if we had hired a consultant. So we hired a consultant. The thing with hiring a consultant, make sure you get the right one. We wanted to make sure that we would that the consultant we chose would fulfill the legal portions of the EA so that it could be approved in the long term. But we wanted to make sure that they also were really super sensitive to tribal sovereignty, to stewardship, to the values that Metlakatla considers important as actions in implementing a plan like this. We ended up working with Two Bears Consulting. They're a company out of Juneau, Alaska. They were really, really great. They had great sensitivity to Metlakatla's decisions as far as how we would manage resources that were culturally appropriate. We took our old plan, tore it up, put it back together. What were the things that were missing? What were the things that were great? What were the things that we could improve on? What should we leave exactly as it was? And then we worked really closely with the Fish and Wildlife team, with the forestry team, with all of the different resource managers, tribal council, the different committees. And one of the tricks that we've learned is that if you are working with a consultant, is to get them to send you not just drafts of the whole plan, but chapters, so that you have bite-sized pieces that you can really examine and make sure that you're finding anything that is out of alignment with what your community wants, anything that is missed, weird things like I'm sure you guys all have this too, but you know, there's a map and it's got official place names on it, but those place names aren't local names. Those aren't the names that we locally identify as locations. So to make sure that we have all of the language that's going to be understood locally included in the plan. We really needed the support of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Their staff was amazing in making sure that we didn't miss anything. They did a really good job reading our plan and provided really super great feedback. So you got to have all of those things lined up: a great consultant, support from your council, support from the BIA, and your resource managers. Final tips and takeaways. So if you're going to perform invasive species work, and if you're going to use federal dollars, you have to have an EA. It's just the way the world works. But the BIA can provide you with tools, funding, technical assistance. So that doesn't mean that all is lost just because that's a requirement. Ask other tribes for examples, help, advice. Ask us. We've been through this now twice. We're more than willing to share our experience or to provide some of the resources that we've found were effective, some of our outreach activities, different ways that we've been able to help out. Make sure that your EA reflects your community's values. Get the right consultant. Totally matters. Make sure that they are very sensitive to data sovereignty, making sure they're using your tribe's voice and prioritizing tribal priorities. Get the FONSI. The FONSI, the finding of no significant impact, that's what makes your EA actionable. What makes it fully approved to be used for funding applications, and it enforces the actions that are in your EA management plan. It gives your EA teeth so that you as a tribe can implement it and help others to follow up. So that's the speed version of updating an EA.